There we go. So thanks everyone for joining, and I hope this will be useful. I'm going to start. I have a bit of an agenda to start with, and then I'll just open it up for Q&A. So this is, I didn't pull it up in the Word program, but so my plan for tonight is to just go through just a quick orientation to what the CRM is used for, understanding what's in a context record, how you do the various types of searches that are available, how to add a new person and record their membership, the basics on groups, how you know who's in your chapter, who's your friends, who's your members, and then using that to find out what your numbers are, and then open it up to Q&A. So to start with, I have logged in. I guess I can log back out. So we have a test chapter leader because the view I see is slightly different than what you see. If folks don't mind, I'm just going to mute everyone. We've got somebody with some background noise. Okay. So this is the login screen that you come to when you get to, if you go to My YPT up here at the top, when you're on the YPT website. And if you are a chapter leader and you sign in, what you will see is this page when you come in. And from there, there's an option over on the right-hand side of the screen that says CiviCRM, and that's what takes you into our system. On the front page, this is information that anybody who is a member of YPT will see when they log in. It just shows their basic information about where they are. I've put the test chapter leader in Chicago, but we can move it into another chapter. And because this is signed in as an admin, on the edit options, we'll have a few more edit. Sorry, it looks the same. So you can change your password, upload a photo, change your time zone. My computer's being a bit slow apparently. But then go in and change the name and the chapter that someone's in, and then fill in more information about them. So from there, if we go to CiviCRM, this is the back side of the system. This is where all the database is. At the moment, your best clue that you're in there, there's two things. One are the options up at the top of the screen. This black bar will appear. It will stay with you the whole time that you're on the CRM side. And CRM stands for Constituent Relationship Management Database. And we had this built for us. It's meant to replace all the disparate systems we've been using. I think most of the folks on that have signed in today are aware of that, but it does our events, it does our mailings, it does our membership database, and it just keeps track of everybody that's associated with us. So right now, the other clue that you're in this side is that you still see these green buttons over here, which we've taken off the main page, but it's trickier to remove. So this front page that you come to is basically useless. The dashboard, I have never figured out how to configure. Not a whole lot you can do there. I'm just gonna, what did we say we were gonna talk about? Okay, so let's go in and using the character here, that is us, take a look at what is in a member record. So the first thing that comes up is the summary page. You can edit any of these items. If you mouse over, you'll see that they kind of highlight the box, and we can click in there and change the name. So if you have somebody who signed up for an event and only used their email and doesn't have their first and last name, but you know who they are either after the event or because you know them, they're probably showing their email as the person up here, but you can click and then change it. The same goes with any of the boxes down here. And a really important, so one thing to note is that if somebody has a record set up for themselves for accessing the system, you'll see a blue number over here for user ID. The CiviCRM ID is the one that is just the number. They're both numbers that are just assigned to them. But this blue number right here means that they have an account to be able to access through My YPT, so they can update their own information. And if you click on that, it'll take you back out to the screen that we saw when we first came in with all the information about us, except in that case it will take you to whoever's record you're looking at. Another important piece of information is this chapters box down here. So we can see that test chapter leader is in Chicago. So if test chapter leader were to move to New York, you would just change that. And then if you were in the Chicago chapter and you just moved somebody over to New York, they'll stop being visible for you, I believe, unless they're also on your email list. So we'll say that test chapter leader is going to get Chicago's emails. Oops. And then contact information, this is just where the Twitter handle is hidden if somebody has filled that in, and then the option to be listed in the directory. And test chapter leader isn't listed in the directory because that's not helpful, because test chapter leader isn't anyone really. So the other tabs up here give you insight into other aspects of what the person has done. So test chapter leader isn't a member, but if they were, you would see that a membership were here and the contribution that had been recorded in order to get them to be a member. Under activities is basically everything that has happened to this person while they have been using the system. So you'll see that, for example, so this account is only really receiving bulk emails because it's signed up on some of the lists. And since I put it in Chicago, whenever I moved it into the Chicago chapter, that's when test chapter leader started receiving Chicago emails. And then you can see here that I sent out the bulk email. So that means I used the mailing, the CiviMail function, because it was added by me. That means I was the person who wrote it, or who sent it. And that this is the email I sent, the YPT admins, CiviCRM, happy office hours, when that was done. And then the view, and you can also see the mailing reports for somebody. If I had signed up to go to any events as test chapter leader, that would show up right here. And if I had an employer listed here, that would be a relationship that I have. So the employers all have records, which are then cross-referenced with the members. And then test chapter leader is in Chicago, and if this is updated, we'll see if it spins around. So there's so whenever this account was set up, it was probably early on when we were still learning how to do smart groups. And so test chapter leader was just added by the administrator of the system to the Chicago primary and to Chicago mailing list. You no longer have to do that when you add somebody to a place. I'll go over it a bit more, but the list of groups up there is not totally accurate because it won't capture all the smart groups that they're in. And so what the smart groups are, they're just saved searches. So the groups exist, but they also exist as saved searches. And so you can add someone directly to it, but then if something changes that would have normally caused them to leave the group, you'll have to manually remove them. But if you're using the smart search, the fact that you saw I just moved the test chapter leader into New York, now test chapter leader is showing up as being on the New York City primary and the New York City mailing list. So just to finish out the tabs, notes, we don't really use these, nor do we use tags. You'll see sometimes that when we've done big imports, that's mostly what's been used here. So for example, this year I did the TRB 2014. Whoops. And I don't think the chapter leaders have permission to do that. So you saw the warning boxes pop up. And the last thing is the change log. So you can see who has, usually you can figure out this way, who added somebody to the database. And if the person has been making their own changes on their record, then they'll show up there. If they've been making them, sorry, from the side of the user side of my YPT. So we know that Andrew was the person who created the test chapter leader. Andrew works for the is one of the developers that helped set up this system for us. So that's the basics on understanding a contact's record. The other next step is taking a look at searches. So there's a quick way to do it, which is I can just start searching up here, which will bring up anybody that's in your chapter. So I'm assuming there's probably someone with the last name Smith in New York. And so here we go. We have a Ronald Davis that works at CDM Smith. So if I were trying to find folks that worked there, bring up his record, it looks like test chapter leader is still showing up in Chicago. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to see these, but that's a quirk to work out. But you can generally see people who are signed up on your mailing list, and yeah. So anybody that's on your mailing list is visible to you. So test chapter leader will pretend is still in Chicago because that's the list that is visible to this person today. So that's the quick way to do the search if you kind of know the name of the person that you're looking for. I probably, yep, I won't come back up. So the other way is to go over here to search, and find contacts is essentially the same as that box over there, but the advanced search has a lot more that you can do. You can search by name or a part of their email, and those can just be partial things. You can limit the types of contacts that come back. So if I were definitely trying to find a person and not a business, when I typed in Smith, then I would select that I want to see an individual. And you can select multiple things. Say I wanted, no, we don't use household, but if we did, you could say I don't want to see households, I just want to see individuals or organizations. And so everything that pulls up in the drop down in that list is what they're going to search. And so you can see here that Test Chapter Leader is linked to Chicago. So the groups that you can see are your Chicago primary or your Chicago mailing list. And I'll go over that more later, but primary is everybody who's their primary chapter is that chapter, and the mailing list is much broader. So everybody should only have one primary chapter, but should have, and that's linked to the chapter that they're listed with. And then if they've signed up for multiple mailing lists, they can be on that. And everybody who's in Chicago primary is automatically in Chicago mailing list. A useful thing to know is that there is the search operator option here. And if you wanted to search two different things, so an or, you have an option for and or. Usually you'll want to use and, but there are times when you're building the queries that you might want to use or. Tags are generally not going to apply. Don't know why you'd be, if you were searching for phone numbers, not all the records have phone numbers. Everybody's got an email. Almost everybody's got a first and last name, but the only required element is an email. Yeah, you can see who's not receiving emails that has said don't send me any bulk emails. So that's, you might find that useful at some point. And then there's a series of drop-down boxes that come in here. So the address fields, if you were trying to find somebody within a particular city, for example, or a particular state. So if you wanted to know how many in the Chicago chapter list an address in Indiana. So you're trying to figure out if you should plan an event, or if you want to, you kind of know your area and you think you've got addresses on enough people, you could find contacts within a certain distance of something. Custom fields is quite useful. It's where you can find, so these radio buttons here are for everyone that's what chapter they're associated with. So you'll mostly just, I mean, you automatically can only see the people on your mailing list or your, or in your, that are assigned to your chapter. So if you wanted to figure out the folks, if you had anybody in Chicago that was on the Minneapolis mailing list, if you were planning to go up there. You can also see who's on mailing lists for other places. Whether they've opted to be listed in the directory, their Twitter handle. I find that all of these things are the same things we saw in the contact record, so activities or relationships. So you could find everybody who works for, so you would find employee of, and then name the organization. So you want to know everybody who worked for CDM Smith, for example. However, we've chosen to put that in there as a record. So that's sometimes, if you notice, this starts to automatically populate as you type. So it can be useful. So in this case, now I know that CDM Smith is like that. And I could get to the same information by going over to CDM Smith's record, but don't have to. The demographics, I don't think we use anything in here because we don't do birth date and deceased date. The system is built for a much broader set of organizations than we are, and some of them use it much more extensively. If you wanted to figure out if they received a particular mailing, that can be used. But most likely you're going to be down here looking at memberships, trying to find out who who's members. So to use our CDM Smith example, so I've put in CDM Smith in the employee of, whoops, and it didn't like that. All right, we'll try something else. Okay, well, that's the basics of the advanced search. So I could do this, start the same search I had done before that was just trying to find out anyone whose name includes Smith. And here we see that, again, Ronald Davis is the only one coming up in Chicago that has any connection to a name or an email that is like Smith. So the other type of search you can do that's a lot more detailed is the, sorry, not the full text search, the search builder. And this allows you to build your options. So there's a certain, things are associated with different things. So individual or contacts contains a lot of the information. So this is things like the chapter and the directory and the email, chapter email list sign up. Has a lot of their address attributes are associated with this. Individual is more like name, yeah, name, gender. Name is the main thing we have. Organization is if you were trying to find a business, which we don't really use. Contribution is if you're trying to find somebody's money so you can see when they paid. Participant would be for events. Membership is for obviously memberships. And activity is things like emails. So if I wanted to find out all the well, what's something I didn't think through a good example on this one. Everybody who is in the, oops, still, there we go, in Chicago, and this is not the way you would necessarily go about doing this, who is a member. So membership status is how I would see that. And I want to find out everybody who is a new member. So they signed up within the last month. And there we go. And the nice thing I will say about Search Builder is that if you're just trying to get a sense of something without having to download all the records, whatever fields you have put up here in the search criteria are the ones that show up in the search. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to export them like that. There is an option here, so I can either select all these right there, or say select all 12 records, and there's a whole series of things you can do. I don't think you can actually add the contacts to the group. It'll be mad at you. But you could, for example, send an email to the contacts, or you could schedule or send a mass mailing. And for a larger group, you would schedule a mailing. That's the CiviMail. Send the email is actually just a direct email from the system. But I could also, what was I going to do this? Export contacts. And so then you could go, and it allows you the option. You can usually select the fields that you want to export. There's a kind of a basic saved one that's named Aaron after the former, I guess he was administration, and he was doing a lot of the dues payouts. And so this was a field that he used for that or for finding things. And then from there, you can continue and you'll see all the fields that he had selected to see. So he wanted to know the first name, last name, email, city, state, country, and the current employer. You can only pull up the individual records this way, but you might want to know what chapter they're in, for example. So that's the search builder. The other sets of searches up here can also be found in the drop downs under each of these categories. So find contributions, find mailings, find memberships, find participants. These are all linked to the payment processor, the email system, the membership database, the event database. Okay, I'm just gonna. So if we were going to, something that you'll probably frequently do is add a new person. So go to contacts and you would go to a new individual and it'll bring up that whole big record. And the key things you need to do are make sure that you put in a name. We'll put in Jane Doe. And maybe Jane Doe, we'll say Jane Doe works for CDM Smith. And you'll see that it starts to bring up the options here. Full disclosure, I don't work for CDM Smith. They just came up when I started searching Smith. So now they're my employer default. And then you need to make sure that you put an email in for this person. So it's probably jane.doe at, we'll say Jane is at Gmail. And that is her main email. And then always good to do, check for matching contacts. The system will go take a look, see if they see anybody else that's got jane.doe@gmail.com or a similar name. And then lo and behold, up in the box right here, it says, nope, none found. This won't help you if somebody is in another, already listed another chapter or isn't connected to your chapter, but at least it's a good check for your own records, particularly on the emails. Because if folks have maybe added themselves to an event and then you're trying to go back in and you didn't find them, that's one way. And the really important, you should make sure that you note the chapter that they're in so that you'll be able to see them once you save this record. So save. And having talked to folks before, it sounds like the only way that you can really get to Jane is first make sure that Jane is in your chapter, and then if you want to record a membership, do that second. So we can see here Jane has an employer, so she's going to list over here as being an employee of CDM Smith. Now, say Jane paid me on cash at our last event and is now a member. So we would go to add membership. Option here would be she's a member, which will automatically populate the cost of this. So you'll see for recording the membership payment, which is this box is checked right here. So we start from membership, not from contribution. And then for the source, you can just leave that blank or fill it in and say, you know, trivia. I think Chicago just recently had a trivia. And say it's the next day and the event actually happened last night. So I would record that she became a member last night. Write that in there. These dates here for start date and end date, they will automatically fill themselves in. And then, so she paid, so I'm going to record the membership. And since I think a lot of times what people are recording will be the Square payments, so that's set as the default right now. That's a new addition recently. I added that to the drop-down list because we have a lot of folks paying by Square. So now it's an automatic option that comes up. But if she paid by credit card, but we'll say she paid by cash, payment status is completed. And one thing I don't know if anybody's really doing, but we haven't been doing this send confirmation and receipt, but you can check that box and it'll send it from, in this case, I would definitely send it from the info. And there's a standard system message template that's not very pretty, but it does just say, thanks for paying, we got your money. So that might be helpful for folks to think about doing. But we're not going to try and email jane.doe@gmail.com because I'm sure somebody's got that email. And if there was any sort of note that you needed to add here, you can do that. One thing is that if you have somebody who is like a sponsor who's paying, a good place to mention that is in the source up there. So if this was a CDM Smith, that would be the real thing that I would put up there as opposed to maybe trivia. And then if I say save, and don't worry, Chicago, I will take this off before we're done, so that I don't think that you owe me this come next dues payout. So you can see the source there, and then the contributions. An important thing to note is that the source here is not going to show up as being the cash that we had originally written in. When the contribution gets recorded over, it's going to list that it was an offline sign up, which is what it refers to when it's not coming through one of our payment processors. And the main payment processor is the when people go to my YPT and hit the join button. So if somebody's done that, this will say online sign up, join YPT, or online sign up, renew my membership. And if there's anything here that you wanted to edit or modify, say the payment was received on a different date, all that can be done by just clicking the edit button right here and just changing out some of the information that's there. Do note that if you remove this membership, it will also remove the contribution. So be careful if you choose to delete a membership. Just make sure that if there's any payment associated with it, that maybe you do it differently. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm freezing the system. So I think that's the main thing on recording a membership. I kind of already mentioned the basics on the groups, but what happens is that everybody who is in their primary chapter right here, there's only one that you can be in. You're automatically added to the group called chapter-primary. So every chapter has one of those, and every chapter also has a mailing list named as such. And you can't actually just email the people that are in using the list as a drop-down, you can't send a mailing to folks that are in Chicago primary. And I'll go more over that in the mailings office hours I was going to do. But yeah, so those groups automatically populate based on the boxes that are checked down here. And then, what else was I going to promise with that? Yeah. So if you want to figure out the all-important question of how many friends and how many members do I have, if you go to search and you go to advanced search, you can select the group. So to know how many people are in your chapter, which is going to be friends and members, go ahead and select your chapter group and then just hit search. And this number right here, so there's 283 people whose primary affiliation for a chapter is Chicago. If you want to know how many members you have, you then go to the same mailing, which you can just do edit search criteria, keep it in Chicago primary, go to memberships, select member, and then we usually count new, current, and grace as that. So new signed up in the last 30 days, last 3 months, I believe. Current means that that's just the general member status once they're not new. And grace means that they expired within the last 30 days. As soon as they've passed the 30-day mark, they're expired. You can also have folks that are pending if they've said that they're going to pay you later in cash. We do occasionally have people say that. And if you do get that cash payment, make sure you go in and update the record to say that they paid and record the payment. So in this case, we're going to do new, current, and grace to find out how many members we've got that are in those statuses. So now we see that there are 72. So to get to number of friends, it's just total number in the chapter, 283, minus members, 72, gets you to just over 200 people. And that's how I do the numbers on my end for every chapter as well in the tracking sheet that I run. The other thing that might be helpful at points to look for in this same type of search is going to figure out who expired recently. And you can see the end date, for example. So I wanted to know who expired in the previous month. Oh, Danielle. I know Danielle. I'll have to bother her. So it looks like Danielle is... Okay, our search didn't work quite right. What happened here? All right, I'm not quite positive why Danielle came up in this search. These are the odd quirks in the system that I haven't totally figured out. There it is. So originally Danielle was in Chicago, got added to Chicago primary. Her chapter is still listed as San Francisco. And so now she's showing up in both places. So that means I need to go through and clean this up because I don't believe as a chapter leader, yep. Maybe it will let you remove. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and take Danielle off of Chicago. So now Danielle only shows up as being in San Francisco. Not sure why she's showing up in the saved group, because she's definitely only in San Francisco. So she shouldn't be visible, but nonetheless. So that's how you figure out how many members and friends that you have. Yeah, so that was my basics of whatever anything that I had. I'll unmute all the lines, and if there's questions, feel free to go for it. And they don't have to be about the basic stuff. You guys can ask me about whatever.
How do you mail friends versus members? Can you send out a separate mailing for friends versus members?
So that one's a little bit tricky. How would I do that? Yeah.
Would
Okay.
you have to create a
So,
special group?
no. So under the mailings, what I would do, we're just going to call this test mailing. Hmm. No, wait. I don't want to find mailings. I want to do a mailing. Sorry. Okay, test mailing. Um, here, where so I want to email all my friends. So saying maybe limiting it to my Chicago primary folks. And then, oh, hmm. All right. My original thought on how to do that is not going to work because the logical way I would do it is there's also an option. There's one of the groups on the national level that is just all members, and I was going to exclude everybody that was a member. Um, so the challenge is that as a chapter leader, you can't actually create new groups. At least not that you'll be able to see and use. At least that's my understanding. I don't know if folks on the line have tried to do that and succeeded. I've seen where chapters have created groups, but my sense I didn't think you could actually find them again once they were there. So the other way would go in and do a search. Um, well, it'd help if at some point you happen to send an email that only went to your members, and then you could just exclude those folks. Um, all right. I'll be honest, I don't have a good answer for that one, and we should probably figure it out. Is that something that would be useful? Is that something that you regularly want to do?
Well, we're trying to persuade friends to become members,
Mm-hmm.
and by doing like exclusive emails, or our newsletter has only exclusive information for members only, but in order to do that we have to differentiate between the two groups, so we're sending them different emails.
So in that case, if it's something where you're emailing both groups separately, but it's happening around the same time, I would start by emailing your members. Um, so in that case, you might be mailing the entire mailing list, right? Because those are you don't care where in the country they're a member, you just want them to be a member. So then if you were
Right.
to do member new current grace, because the grace members still have access to everything and are hopefully going to pay again. So if I did that search and had the 86 contacts come up here, then I could say schedule a mass mailing. And this won't be a specific group, but then we could say this is, member mailing um, for this month or something. And then you need to pick a group that they can unsubscribe from because it's not a standard group, which is kind of a pain in the butt. What would I recommend? So you could just pick a group, quite honestly, because they're not on a regular group. So the unsubscribe button will be a little funny, but they can opt out of everything. Um, and so then you would send this mailing, and then one of the options that would come up here is the email that you had sent later on. And so you could then pick this email, which you would intelligently have started with Chicago, since Chicago seems to be doing a good job of that. And then Chicago member mailing would show up in this list, and where it says exclude recipients of these mailings, you could then select that email. So then you would go back and say that you were going to do the Chicago mailing list. So start a new mailing all over, if that makes sense, after you've sent this mailing to the Chicago members. And then
Mm-hmm.
say that you want to do your mailing list, but exclude everybody who already got the email from this Chicago member mailing. Does that help?
Yes, that does.
So it's a roundabout way, but at the moment I'll keep looking into that if there's a way that I can. Um, the challenge is that your list of friends is both people that are expired and people who are never have been a member. And those two show up differently in the database. One is that the record is blank, and the other one is that it's expired.
Okay. Well, this seems like it will work. I'll give it a try, and if it doesn't, I'll let you know.
Much appreciated.
I have a question about adding members that are affiliated or when a sponsor joins and they get
Hmm.
the for free individual memberships.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to add those? Because I'm not sure. I've been doing it, but it's a little tricky, and I'm not sure I'm doing it how it's supposed to be done.
Um,
Because I need to record a zero payment, which is a little hard to do.
yeah. So the main place that you need to put that is, let's find our friend Jane. So here, when you record a membership, you have an option. You saw when we recorded the membership that we could record a contribution as well. And so you
Mm-hmm.
don't need to record in this option, you would, right here, this box would normally be checked, record membership payment. You would just unselect that because when somebody is a sponsor, then there is no payment to record with the individual. And so right here where you see source, you would just type in PV sponsorship, for example. And that's
Okay.
really, and I think that's what folks I think have been doing. Um, Mostly I just, so as the person who does the dues reconciliation, I just need somewhere in either the membership or the contribution record to show where the money came from.
Okay.
So when folks come up, um, yeah, I believe that's what I've been doing.
What's the select option? Because I know it makes me fill
Oh,
that
sorry.
out, but you don't need to choose a price set. Okay.
Right, because it's either or. The price set is, so you could, instead of doing board of advisors or member, you could just say membership sign up. Um, Interesting. I don't know why you would record the sign up of a friend, but apparently we have it set up to do that. But normally I would just select member.
Okay. Thank you.
And then if you record PB sponsorship, I'll go through and pull all the all the recently recorded memberships for folks and just make sure that the sponsorships are in there. Um, I believe at this point we haven't been, oh, it's been like 2 months since I've had to do dues reconciliation. And I'm trying to remember if we've been asking for $5 back for anybody that you take a take a sponsorship position for. Um, I don't know what we had been doing on that. Um, okay.
Yeah, I just added 2 sets, and I think that was after the reconciliation. But I did note who it was, so there won't be any lost ones in the system.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Um, you can see them. So one thing you can see here is if you go to the dashboard for the memberships or contributions, you'll only see the folks in your chapter that have paid. But right there where it says source, that's on the national level. That's what I'm watching.
So when we want to try to tabulate how many paid memberships we have, we should go to this screen and just cancel out the ones that are sponsors, or is there
Yeah.
a way to pull that?
So contributions. So you want to know how many are sponsored versus paid?
Yes.
Um, yeah, my suggestion would just be to go to find memberships and then probably just pull those. And then I think if we pull it up, it'll show, um, as long as you've been recording the sponsorship in the source, yeah. Then I would just download the list or just simply sort by the source. Let's see what comes up. So some of them don't, but here's one. So we have the one I recorded as a sponsor. Not sure why that one looks like that, but normally they look like you'll just see a whole bunch then that just say online contribution, join YPT, and there'll be a few that are renew your membership if they're an existing member that has paid up again. That renew versus new is a bit of an odd thing right now because everybody that got in, we're about to pass the point, but everyone who got imported into the database when we did the big import last June, um, or last kind of February through April, I guess. Um, those folks don't show up as renewals right now because they were just because of the way it was set up. Um, So I wouldn't pay too much attention to join versus renew. But you can see here's a few folks um, in the way that their membership got recorded, that they show up as a renewal. And you can
Thank
see
you.
this is one where I've tried to start standardizing it, that it's a square payment from national, as opposed to just different squares. Hopefully everybody is using the national square. It's a good deal for you. It costs us more because we currently eat the fees, but or national, so the internet, the overarching board, we our $5 gets reduced that we get, but you get the full 15. If you use your own square, you have to pay the fees, and we'll just ask you for $5. So, but I think everybody knows that, is doing that now. And um, okay, other questions?
Yeah, I just had a question about adding members again.
Mm-hmm.
The way we're set up right now in Philly is we've been just sort of keeping our own log of different people who are our contacts. So I guess should be friends of YPT, but are not in the database right now because they've just been people who've emailed us and that sort of thing. So is there any way other than adding people individually to sort of sync up our two lists and add a bunch of these people as friends if they're not members yet, or to make sure that their member records are linked to ours?
Yeah. So I would strongly encourage you to do that. And the way you can do that is to go to import contacts. And what you need to make sure, and I can help you with a separate email, is making sure that you've got all the right fields in there. And I can just send you the example from how I uploaded for TRB. But you just put them into a CSV file, choose the file. Probably the first row will have headers, and then it'll ask you to go through and map the fields. So I can, for example, just re-upload if I can find the TRB upload, I can re-upload it again. There it is. The TRB contacts. So I have, can show you that file for reference. So that's got the basic information that you would need, that you would expect to see in a record. So everything that I had about them. And like I said, I'm happy to send this. And I had set it to upload chapter. I think I got that to come over right. I'm not positive. I don't remember what I'd had to do. So I chose the file. First row contains headers. The contacts are individuals. This is going to find everybody's duplicate, but you can tell it to skip. And then the dedupe rule is how it tells whether someone's a duplicate. So the easiest is to just say email. That's the simplest one to make sure. So that and then I don't think I have a loaded field mapping saved. So then you can see here.
Yeah, I think I understand how this would work.
Yeah, so it's just pulling up everything. I probably set the email as main, and then and you'll see what everything comes in and if it's reading okay. This one it couldn't figure out chapters, so it didn't. So I had, so sometimes it doesn't know what's in there.
Okay.
And then you do it, and it'll kick back a bunch of errors, and you have to you may have to kind of manually go through and re-add the people that came back as errors for whatever reason. But it's a pretty straightforward process. And one thing you can do is tag them all. I can't remember where that step is. I think maybe in the preview. But when I did the TRB import, I just tagged everybody as being the TRB contacts, just so that I could easily find them again, to make sure that there was corrections there. And one thing helpful to note in all of this is that if you upload folks and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe they were already in the database, or you find that somebody is somehow duplicated, I can merge those records for you. It's something on the overall administrator side. I have an option under contacts to dedupe the records. So I go through on a periodic basis and try and match up when people have more than one name. Or more than one record. I've still got about 250 to 300 of people that I'm pretty sure, or I guess it's less than that. Maybe it's half that number. But it's about 150 people that somehow exist with the same name and the same chapter, and I just haven't cleaned them out because it's a less automatic process. But do always check for duplicated emails when you do it.
Okay, and then if we run the option there to skip the duplicates, that'll skip what's in my Excel file and leave what's on the database.
Yes.
Okay.
So if it finds somebody, then it'll tell you, oh, nope. And also, if you ever have anybody move into your chapter that doesn't have an online account set up, but you're pretty sure they already exist in the database, feel free to just email me and say, I think this person just moved from Washington, D.C. Can you move them over? And I can do that.
Okay. I'm glad this exists because I've been putting it off, worrying that I was going to have to add everyone individually.
Yeah, I hear you.
I figured there must be an option.
Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah, no, sorry. There are, if you're ever just playing around in the database, there's a whole bunch of reports that are over here. And so it'll give you some of those same things that I told you how to do the searches. It'll run the reports for you as well. But I haven't played with those enough to really tell you in detail which ones are really useful and where you're better off just running the searches yourself. So, other questions? Okay.